So now we're going to start, and thank you all for coming. First, let me talk about the Jewish Historical Society of Fairfield County Book Talks. The program is free and open to the public and is underwritten by Marcy Schoenfeld in honor of her beloved parents, Rose and Abraham Schoenfeld, and by Eileen Belinsky and Susan Trotz in memory of their beloved parents, Eleanor and Nathan Belinsky. Thank you all for that. Very much appreciated. Now, many of you know Bob. To most of you, Bob is many things. He's a friend, a coach, and a teacher who, through his work, brings out the best in whoever he, in fact, encounters. And I think we would get a lot of, you didn't say enough. But what I'm saying is true. I've gotten to know Bob, and I consider him a dear friend. And I think we're very lucky to have him here today. Without any further ado, I'm happy to introduce Bob as he presents James McBride's The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. Bob, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for your very kind words. And now I'll let the check clear. So you'll be paid for your comments. Thank you very much, one and all, and good evening to everybody. And for those of you who know me, it's great to see you again. And for those of you who don't, I look forward to meeting you either through this or another venue. So what I'm going to do at first is to share the screen that I have, because I was very good, and see what I did there? I was very proud of myself that I was able to do a keynote presentation on my Apple computer. So as we discussed earlier, Peter and Nancy and I, this is why we have children, so that we know how to use our computers. Right. So tonight is about The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride.
Can you hear it?
And see what I did? I did that, but I don't know how to do the next slide. Oh, I see. Isn't that great? Well, so much for that. Let me, there's a way to do this, and that isn't it. So I'm going to stop the share and do this. Hang on a second, folks. Just bear with me a moment. And I don't know how to do that. So yeah, okay. So forget about that. I'm just going to do what I need to do, which is get you guys back. Okay, here we go. So the Heaven and Earth bookstore, and I got this on I apologize. I did this on a, just bear with me a moment. Slide, next slide, new slide. Skip slide, go to. There we go. Next slide. Okay. So that was tough for me.
Few more benches.
Hang on. I just have to get my screen all adjusted. Now we go. The author's background. So he's a biracial child, okay? And a child of a Black Reverend father who passed before McBride's birth, and a white mom, a white Jewish woman whose father was a rabbi from Eastern Europe. Before doing this, in researching this book, he also researched his family. Now, her father, his grandfather from Eastern Europe, was an Orthodox rabbi, and when he researched that part of his family, found that people really remembered that grandmother very well, in very good terms and glowing terms, and not so glowing about his grandfather, which may have had something to do with how his mother left Judaism. And I'm not sure if she left before she married or after she married. But his mom was twice widowed. So the man who was McBride's father and was her first husband, and then she remarried. He was raised in the projects. I'm not sure where. It's at Sandy Hook. Now, Sandy Hook could be any number of Sandy Hooks, but we'll leave it at that. He was the eighth of 12 children, and his family was largely accepted by the local community. His mom grew up in rural Southern communities, and when she married his dad, the parents, which was not infrequent from the old country, his parents, her parents shunned her and sat shiva for her upon the marriage. Oh, Red Hook, Brooklyn. Okay, great. Thank you. I mean, I think there's a Red Hook, New Jersey also, so I'm not sure how many Red Hooks there are. I know there's a lot of Springfields in the United States. There could be more than one Red Hook. At 19, when he was 19 years old, he answered an ad for a dishwasher to become a dishwasher at a sleepaway camp for children with disabilities. He worked there for 4 years, all through college, and it was run by a man named Cy Friend, a Jewish man, and the camp was on land that was donated by a Jewish theater owner. And you can tell, for those of you who've read the book, you can feel that influence right away through one of the main characters in the book. He worked there for all 4 years of all 4 summers that he was in college. Cy Friend, this man Cy Friend, was also a principal of a local school during the year and ran the camp in the summers. He said that he went to see an elderly man named Bill Saltzman, and after they talked, this man, Bill Saltzman, called Cy and said, I've got a kid here, I've got a boy here who's too smart to be a dishwasher. Make him a counselor. Sounds like a normal Jewish conversation of when you got a contact somewhere. I worked there for 4 summers, and what Cy really taught us, and what the children taught us, was equality. Love was the dominant force. This was a camp for children with disabilities, mental and physical. Well, we would, in today's terms, say mental and physically challenged. Love was the dominant force. And he says, I fell in love with those kids. I'm still in touch with many of those campers, which I found very touching. They gave me so much. Their philosophy, their ability to negotiate life with so much less than what I had, without complaint and with a sense of joy, was something that I never forgot. And I think that's such a beautiful beautiful sentiment. So and I wanted to share that with you. Now, if I can remember how to get to the next screen, that would be even better. I'm so proud of myself now. No. Okay. Let's see. No, not that. Damn it. How embarrassing is that? Hold on a second. Let me do that. Why can't I do this? Okay. I apologize for this. Let me just do this. If I do that, I should be able to. Here we go. Let's see. Now, there we go. Okay, so the main characters. Hang on. There we go. The main characters. We know were Chana and Moshe Ludlow. And Moshe has a brother named Isaac Ludlow. Chana and Moshe are the main characters, as I said. Chana and Moshe are the owners of the Heaven and Earth grocery store. Isaac is, as I said, Moshe's very wealthy and highly connected cousin in Philadelphia. There are another couple of guys, brothers Ira and Mark Skrupskelis. Where he got the name Skrupskelis, I don't think he knew a guy named Skrupskelis, unless it was shortened or changed from something else, which was more unpronounceable when they came to Ellis Island. Then Addie and Nate Timblin Addie and Nate are Black. Um, Dodo is a Black child who is the nephew of Addie. And Dodo became deaf due to an accident, a furnace or an oven that exploded. And his mother had recently passed.
The onions are good.
And had recently passed. He lost his sight and his hearing. His sight came back, but his hearing did not. He is sent ultimately to a place called Penhurst, and I'll tell you more about Penhurst in just a moment, where he meets a child. This is Dodo. Dodo meets a child who has I'm not sure what, who is so disfigured and can't communicate. But somehow they find a way of communicating. So that Dodo calls him Monkey Pants. There is a really bad guy by the name of Son of Man. And it's a very interesting name, which I'll get to in a moment. And then there are a couple of other figures. Paper, whose real name is called Patty Millison, but since she knows everything that goes on in the community, everybody calls her Paper, as if she's a newspaper. And there's another character, Midgie Flood, who is part of the community that is separate. That's part of the the Black community, but is a separate part of the Black community. Then there's Doc Roberts, who believes he's from the Mayflower, but is not from the Mayflower, as we learn in the book. But it's all about what you believe, I guess, which actually is part of a theme, I think, in the book. And there's also a person by the name of Gus Plitzka, who is a successful immigrant. Now, there's also a character who appears at the beginning and a couple of places elsewhere in the book. And his name is, in English, would be pronounced Malachi. In Hebrew, it's Malachi. And it's very interesting, this guy Malachi. The character Malachi, or the name Malachi, is the last of the prophets in the Hebrew Bible. His part of the Hebrew Bible closes the section of the prophets. The Hebrew Bible has the Torah in it, the 5 books of Moses. Then it has the books of the prophets, and then it has other holy writings. Other holy writings are like the book of Esther, the book of Daniel, Psalms, etc., books like that. But the prophets have their own section, just as the other holy writings and the Torah. And the last book in the books of the prophets is Malachi. And the message of, I read Malachi today. It's only 3 chapters. But I wanted to get ready for you guys. So I read it just in case anybody had any questions about it. So I'm prepared for that later if indeed anybody has a question. But what's interesting about the Hebrew prophets is that every prophet in the Hebrew Bible is referred to as a son of man, as opposed to in the Christian Bible, Jesus is referred to as a son of God. Now, the evil guy who is at this facility, Penhurst, which is the place where Dodo and Monkey Pants are, he calls himself Son of Man. So it's just interesting that is the usage of that person. Now, the locations. The vast bulk, everything really happens in a place called Pottstown, Pennsylvania, which is set in the 1920s, and it's a small and growing backwater town, if you will. And what we experience there is really, and I'll get to it in how McBride really refers to it on his website as a place that experiences a white Christian society in the growing part of the last century. of the 20s and 30s, and then onwards into the 50s. Chicken Hill is both a part and a part of Pottstown, and it includes much of the Black population, the Jewish population, which is in the process or has mostly moved out by the time of that the novel takes place, and of course, a mixed group of immigrants. Then we have the Penhurst State School and Hospital. And I did a little bit of research via our friends at Wikipedia, which was originally founded as the Eastern Pennsylvania State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic. And if that isn't horrible to think about, we'll get to it in a minute. And of course, Philadelphia is the big city. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold from last week. And then there's a place called Hemlock Row. Hemlock Row is where a much smaller population of the Black community lives near Chicken Hill. And it's populated by two major, almost tribes, if you will, the Logods and the Loves. And they're from the old country, and a few of the, how they're referred to. If a Logod is with you, they with you. And there ain't many Loves left, which I think is a very interesting way of saying that, right? And thing is, us Logods, wherever we is from, the old Africa land, I suppose, we were keepers, and the italics are from the book, from the novel. We were keepers of our fellow man. That was our purpose. That was our purpose. We're still that way. And another quote, and it's all from pretty much from the same paragraph. Logod means
sharing. We're not seeing it.
Logod means little parent. Okay. Now, here's a synopsis.
These sharing slides.
I'm sure you can't see this. Oh, shoot. Sorry, that's my fault again. Thank you for saying that. Let me get to.
Oh, excuse me. Alyssa's not on mute. I think
That's okay. She did something that was very important.
Okay.
Because she mentioned that you can't see this. So I'm going to try to get back to.
Oh, you see, he had something on there.
Yeah, I had, and then I took it off so I could switch slides, and then of course, it's not there any longer, and I apologize for that. The slide, the ability to
You would hear me.
the ability to share the slide. And I apologize for that. Oh, my
Bob,
God.
are you clicking the share screen at the bottom of your?
I lost that, and I don't know how to get it back, and that's the problem. One of my problems today. So, and of course, since my children are not home, this is why I can't get it back.
You might want to log out of Zoom and go back into Zoom. All right. You might want to do that. All right.
Okay.
Because if you lost something, then something happened.
Yeah,
right?
that is for sure. And oh, wait a second. Hang on. Oh, I'm gonna get it back, and you're gonna love me again. I hope. There it is. There we go. Oh, that's why. Okay. Do you see that? Do you guys see that?
Yep.
Great. Okay, here we go. I apologize. Okay. Okay, thank you. A synopsis from McBride's website. Okay. So now, when in 1972, when workers, this is from his website, workers in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, were digging the foundations for a new development. The last thing they expected to find was a skeleton at the bottom of a well. This is his description, so that's why I wanted to have this up. Who the skeleton was and how it got there were two of the long-held secrets kept by the residents of Chicken Hill. And of course, we know that these are answered in the novel itself at the very end. The dilapidated neighborhood where immigrant Jews and African Americans lived side by side and shared ambitions and sorrows. Chicken Hill was where Moshe and Chana Ludlow lived when Moshe integrated his theater and where Chana ran the Heaven and Earth grocery store. It's not we could ask why it's called the Heaven and Earth grocery store, but and we'll figure that out. When the state came looking for a deaf boy to institutionalize him, it was Chana and Nate Timblin, the black janitor at Moshe's theater, and the unofficial leader of the black community on Chicken Hill, who worked together to keep the boys safe. That's very important for our understanding of the novel, that they worked together. As these characters' stories overlap and deepen, it becomes clear how much the people who live on the margins of white Christian America struggle and what they must do to survive. And that's why I introduced that idea of white Christian America, because this is how McBride poses it. When the truth is finally revealed about what happened on Chicken Hill and the part the town's the white establishment played in it, McBride shows us that even in dark times, it is love and community, heaven and earth, that sustain us. So obviously that makes sense. And now, oh, I guess I lose the ability to switch the screen now. Oh, there we go. Good. Okay, marvelous. Okay, now this is from our friends, and I use that advisedly, from the New York Times. Excuse me. And they really put it together. The book is a murder mystery locked inside a great American novel. And I can't tell you how many reviews I saw. Sorry, I have my cough drops here, so I apologize for this. How many reviews I saw that call this a great American novel. And that's something to remember. And I have to tell you, I'm used to reading historical books, a lot of nonfiction. And reading this was such a joy for me. It really goes quickly. I didn't have to, keep memos on what date things happen and so on. And this was wonderfully written too. The book, he's a wonderful writer. The story opens in 1972 with the discovery of a skeleton buried in a well in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. And there are a few clues that are found: a belt buckle, a pendant, and a mezuzah, right? Lead the authorities to question the only Jewish man remaining in the town's formerly vibrant Jewish community. And that, we know, that character is Malachi, or Malachi. The novel shifts to the 1920s and 30s to Chicken Hill, the neighborhood in Pottstown where Jewish, Black, and immigrant folks make their homes. And it is here that McBride's tale truly begins. So we know that. And this is really, I figured it would be a nice synopsis just to go through this. We meet Moshe Ludlow, a Romanian Jew who owns a local theater and dance hall, as so many of our ancestors had, and his wife, Chana, a headstrong, mighty-hearted American-born Jew who operates the grocery store for which the book is named. The grocery costs Moshe and Chana more money than it makes because Chana allows many of Chicken Hill's Black and European immigrant residents to take out lines of credit that she never asks them to make good on. I don't know about you, but I have heard stories about my own family who also did things like this. Okay. As the story sets off, we watch Moshe and Chana observe their ever-diversifying community from their respective posts. Moshe watching via his theater, and an increasingly sick Chana from the store. The action is eventually set into motion when Nate Timblin, a Black man who works at Moshe's theater, and Moshe describes him as his close friend, who is both respected and feared by the town's Black population, asks Chana and Moshe to help hide an orphan deaf Black child named Dodo, whom state officials are searching for and plan to institutionalize. While Moshe is resistant, Chana, who champions the most vulnerable in Chicken Hill, is adamant about helping. For Chana, Dodo's presence comes to represent the goodness and light of Judaism, folded neatly into the sunshine reality of the boy. A puff of smoke seen in the distance while on a walk is later revealed to be the accident that deafened Dodo and set him on the path toward the Ludlow's protection. For those of you who read the book, you'll remember that it is Moshe who is taking a walk with this, excuse me, who's taking a walk with this new member of the community, Malachi. And they hear a boom and a puff of smoke. And in the distance, they see the puff of smoke. And Malachi turns and says to Moshe, "That's not a good sign." And now remember, the character Malachi, the name is taken from the last book of the prophets from the Jewish Bible. So while they're on a walk, and that's what happens. So gossip turns out to divulge one of the story's most damning secrets. McBride builds its community and displays its full constellation of characters, all of whom orbit around one another with different gravities, pushing and pulling the story in different directions, which is a beautiful part of the novel. As you know, it gets from one perspective, from another perspective, from so many different perspectives. And what was interesting to me as I went over the book in preparation for this evening is I was looking for the plan that gets set in motion to free Dodo from Pennhurst. And it isn't very clear. And it starts in the middle of the book already, about when if you may recall, when Rabbi Feldman says that he wrote a letter to Isaac, and essentially during the Shiva for Chana, Rabbi Feldman says to Isaac, "Did you get the letter that I sent you?" And he says, I didn't get any letter. I didn't get any letter. And he says he refuses to acknowledge that he received a letter from Rabbi Feldman, which this letter included what happened to Chana and part of the reason for her demise. And only later on do we get an idea of what the plan was, from cousin Isaac bringing money to pay Nate Timblin for something to go on, and then a letter that gets sent from brought from cousin Bernice to one of the other characters, and so on. But the plan isn't obvious, and it's so wonderful how McBride builds it in, weaves it into this story. Okay. And as I said before, and as you notice, it is a book about the changes in American society. Now, Moshe observes it, and he says, the old ways, right? The old ways will not survive here. Moshe writes to a friend. The musical tastes he's noticed have completely changed, and they've gone from black jazz and almost revival music turned into that kind of jazz and hootin' and hollerin', for lack of a better term, but it would be known as that, and to Latino music. And there are so many mentions of jazz greats and Latino greats in the book, which I found wonderful, including Chick Webb and others. And he says there are too many different people, too many different ways. That type of misunderstanding happens on a smaller interpersonal scale too. For instance, to Moshe, Nate is just a dependable helpmate. But to Chicken Hill's Black population, Nate is a man with a dark past, a man who is kind, but who sometimes gets so angry that his eyes burn with dark, murderous rage. And that, of course, is the type of person that is depended upon to help get Dodo out of this horrible institution, Pennhurst. By showcasing neighbors misunderstanding neighbors, McBride shines a light on how communities in America are at times walled apart by difference, even in intimate relationships. And, we know this from our own personal lives, right? We get a misunderstanding. We don't understand this. Someone gives us a cold shoulder. We think, oh, they don't like me. They, have it in for me, whatever. And they just had a bad day. We just don't know that. Through this story, he asks, how do racial and class divides manifest in how we know and see one another, in how we allow ourselves to be known and seen? McBride captures a rapidly changing country as seen through the eyes of the recently arrived and formerly enslaved people of Chicken Hill. He has reached back into our shared past when, by migration and violence, segregation and collision, America was still becoming America. Or I would add, the America that we know today. And through this novel, McBride offers us a reminder, even in the midst of humanity's most wicked designs, love, community, and action can save us. Now, briefly on Pottstown. Pottstown exists. And when researching this novel, McBride went to an area of in Pennsylvania, he went to a place called Pittsville. And when he ran across Pottstown, he looked at that place. He said, "Oh, this is what I'm going to name my story. This is the location for my story." Pottstown is a borough in Montgomery County. It was laid out in 752 to 753 by in honor of its founder, John Potts. It was incorporated in 1815, so it's it's relatively old, as New England goes, or maybe relatively new, depending on your perspective. Originally deeded to William Penn, Germans, Swedes, and English were among the first European settlers, as would be expected. And it was the establishment of the first iron forge in 1714. Pottstown's fortunes became tied to the iron industry. And then the city, or the town, really grew into a city. And of course, it attracted the Potts family, who went on to help pollute the river that was the Manatawny Creek, and the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad. That's the Reading Railroad of monopoly fame. Did have a few stops in Pottsville, including at Penhurst. Now, so now you have an idea of how old Pottstown was and what McBride was reaching for there. Now, some background on Penhurst. This is, I have to tell you, when I read about this, was so awful and really brought the institution and what Dodo was going through into such a unfortunately horrible light, but understandable. Authorized the creation of the Eastern State Institution for the Feeble-Minded and Epileptic. It was planned out. The organization of the facility was planned out, so there would be a number of buildings in two large groups, one for educational and industrial department, and one for the custodial or asylum department. And it was connected by fireproof tunnels with walkways on top of the tunnels for the use of transporting residents with a parallel steam piping system. So when you read that there were tunnels underneath, when Midgie tells Paper and the others at this meeting where she has a plan, and she doesn't draw out a map of the place, but she uses, as you may recall, the pie. She cuts the pie that Paper serves her, and she makes a diagram of where the tunnels are and where Dodo is held. This is what McBride really got into. Ultimately, in 1968, there was an expose, a local expose, and in 1981, a Time magazine article described the place as having a history of being understaffed, dirty, and violent. And ultimately, in 1987, the place was closed down by a case that reached the Supreme Court. So it's really a horrible place. Now, what I wanted to do was open it up for discussion. Before I do that, I just wanted to talk about, just very briefly, that as we mentioned at the top, McBride's mom came from an Orthodox Jewish family. I'm sure he knew a lot of Yiddish words. I also, from what I've read in different interviews with him and different reviews, he spent a lot of time researching the historical community, Jewish community within Pottstown itself, as well as researching the different groups within Judaism, immigrant groups from different parts of Eastern Europe that came into the United States. So that his descriptions of the different groups, I think, is, to my knowledge, is very accurate. And certainly in terms of the Yiddish that is used, was also very accurate. I don't know how many of you speak Yiddish. I do not speak Yiddish. I have a very little, if any, fluency in it. But the words I do know were right there. So anyway, so I don't know how many of you have books with you. And I probably should have asked you at the beginning to get them if you have them. but I'll just, if that's okay with you, and we can open it up for discussion, and Nancy,
Yeah,
you're providing the,
I'm gonna go to the chat.
okay. And again, I want to apologize for the technological mishap at the beginning, and I thank you all for your patience. I really appreciate that. And please forgive me for it.
Um, let's see. They're just comments. Moshe has a variety in his theater, very successful.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Right. And over the course of time, I'll jump in. And over the course of the novel, he speaks about the different acts that keep coming and how there's one evening when a Black group and a Latino group show up at the same time, and they're arguing with each other, which, by the way, would be normal anyway. Who gets top billing? So he understands that. But what was interesting for him, not that they were arguing, but that the Latino group said that they agreed to go on first and not get the top billing, and that the customers went crazy for this Latino group. And then when the Black group that normally had been there every year came on this occasion, on this one evening, when they performed, everybody was blah. All the customers were blah. And that's when he notices times have changed and things are changing. There are different immigrant groups coming in.
There's a comment, all her children went to college and became successful.
Mm-hmm. Right, that's his mom's. That's McBride's mother's children, not Hannah's and Moshe's children.
Let's see. This could be considered a historical fiction. Lots of world events are presented.
Mm-hmm. Right, it's really set in the 20s and 30s. It was a wonderful comment, and it gives you, there are parts of it where it discusses, and I don't have it bookmarked because we've all seen this, where there are views of Jews, stereotyped, horrible views, stereotyped comments about Jews, stereotyped comments about Blacks, stereotyped comments about immigrants. And that certainly feeds into McBride's description of how he is showing white Christian America as the insiders and everybody else as the outsiders.
Let's see. How do you Chona?
Chana, yeah.
Chana is disabled. This is important to the story.
Yeah. Chana is disabled, but as Moshe points out, Chana has been able to accomplish anything she wishes. There's a part in, you'll see on this screen, I hope. It's on page 155, that there is a skating rink, okay? Well, two things. Number one of the Skrupskelis boys, they own a shoe store. And I think it's Marv Skrupskelis, one of the guys, can make any kind of shoe. And he makes a shoe that Hannah uses as one of her shoes for the foot that is misshapen, for lack of a better word. And although she walks with a limp, she's comfortable walking. Now, he could have also made a skate for her for ice skating, but she won't do it. She didn't have that. And on page 155, Moshe and Chana and Dodo are at a place where there's an ice skating rink. Moshe goes up to the top of a hill to write a letter. He gazed down at the skaters inside. Chana had insisted on escaping with him to the skating rink after the boy came. They were an odd family. The Jewish merchant, his disabled wife, and their 12-year-old Negro charge, puttering up the hill into the parking lot in his old Packard, coming to a stop not more than 10 yards from the rink entrance, where a sign had been posted not many years before stating, "No Jews, no dogs, no niggers." That sign had since been removed, but Hannah never skated on her visits, not once, nor did she allow the boy to skate. She complained that her foot prevented her from skating, but Moshe knew better. And he goes on to say in the book that Skrupskelis could have fashioned a skate for her, but she didn't want it. She kept that knowledge and that feeling of derision that had been shown to her, and not just to her now, but to her family, her child, and wouldn't go there. Well, another part of that, and I'm so glad that was brought up, is Doc. Okay, so Doc also had a misshapen foot. And he initially did have, earlier on in the book, did have a shoe made for him by Skrupskelis. But Skrupskelis, of course, worked out of his basement to create these shoes. When Doc's mother, when he was a younger, I guess a teenager, when the mom took him to Skrupskelis to get the shoe made, Skrupskelis didn't speak much. He was an immigrant. Who knows how much of the English language he knew, but also he was a workman. And plenty of immigrant workmen, they do their work and they grunt and will give you the service, right? And we know that from our own lives. When we meet people who are immigrants who don't speak the language, they do their work and here it is. Which is not a knock on immigrants, it's just a condition when you don't know a language. And Doc takes that, and remember, he's been told, and he firmly believes that he is a descendant of the Mayflower. So who are these people that don't even deign to speak to me? Don't they know who I am, who we are, and don't they know what place they have? So Doc, who is part of the reason for Hannah's early demise, I think. He certainly didn't help, even though he's a doctor, and a lousy doctor at that. And the whole town, none of the blacks will go to him because he has a reputation of abusing the women that go to him, and the fact that he evidently is also a lousy doctor. But he goes to get his shoes made by an American, a white Christian American, and will not go to the Skrupskelis store for the shoes, for new shoes that will make him be able to walk without pain.
Okay, Marcia wants to know what happened to Monkey Pants. End of the book. Wait, it's longer. There's more.
Yeah.
End of book indicates in the morning Dodo woke up touching Monkey Pants' fingers, but the rest of him was gone.
He was dead.
Okay, what do you? Okay, then let's see. What do you think of Doc as a symbol of all that is wrong in America?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, and then
wait, well, oh, yeah. So much.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Teresa has her hand raised.
Oh wait, let's go to that question first.
Okay.
As Doc is what's wrong in America?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What think
Yeah.
what's
So
wrong in America?
Yeah. So a couple of things. So on page 370, okay. So Doc, who is fully drunk, right? This is at the Memorial Day parade. And by the way, Doc is what is he? He's one of the leading members of the local Ku Klux Klan, right? He says, as the last firecracker broke across the sky, Doc, fully drunk, howled out his joy. "It's all a dream," he shouted. "This great America, this great land of opportunity, give us your poor, your tired, your weak, and we will give them jobs and homes and businesses. We will make them men and women, and they will," he burped loudly, "replace us." Where have we heard that? Recently, right? Right? Jews will not replace us, as wasn't that in Charlestown, Charlottesville, right? So yes, and frequently we have a doc or another part of the in-group and successful group talking about how, and this happens with Gus Plitzka towards the end. Gus Plitzka is from an immigrant, he's an immigrant, and he has made it big. He is charging for water, and he also gets his water for free from the local source of water, a local well, and he engages with Doc a couple of times, speaking about how these immigrants and how these blacks and how these Jews don't know their places. So I agree with that Doc really represents what's wrong. By the way, what does Doc, how does Doc die at the end? Sorry for those of you who haven't read it yet, but how does Doc die? Someone thinks a debt collector, a loan shark, sends one of his goons to collect from Gus Plitzka. But Gus Plitzka, right, trades coats with someone to wear a blue coat, and Doc keeps on a red coat. Now, remember, this is for, or maybe it's Independence Day. I forget what the parade was for, but the parade is celebrating the founding of Pottstown. And Doc, believes he's from the Mayflower, dresses up in a red coat to represent the British. Rather than dressing up, he's supposed to be in a blue coat. If he had worn the blue coat, he wouldn't have died. Because he wore the red coat, he gets this goon who was sent to by the loan shark. He's mistaken for Gus Plitzka, and he gets killed by this loan shark's goon, thug. Okay, so Doc really does represent what's wrong and what is getting. When we put on, this is one of the themes I think that is part of the book, of the clothes we wear and what we wear, how we present ourselves versus what our actions are. When the two meet, right, they tend to, when our clothing and our actions meet, when they agree, we tend to be more forthright, more honest, more good people. But when we wear clothes that represent who we think we are, and we confuse them with who we really are, I think if we take a longer look at that, which we won't do tonight, but if you were to take a look at that, if you haven't finished the book, take a look at that. If you have the book in your possession, if you want to peruse it, I think you'll find that that's a little bit of a theme, but not an insignificant theme that runs through the book. Go ahead.
Let's see. Teresa has had her hand raised for a long time. Why don't you unmute yourself?
That's okay. For those people who haven't read the book, you gave it away, but
well, but it is a book talk. You're supposed to have read the book.
well, all right. But I mean, not everybody does that. What I liked about the book was all the different groups that ended up working together. All right. And Hannah, to me, was the heaven and earth grocery store.
Correct, yes.
She was so welcoming. She was so giving. It didn't matter who they were. And
Right.
She loved Dodo. I mean, as her own child, because
Right.
she had no children of her own.
Right.
And a relationship with the African community when she was a young girl.
Yes.
And even she was shunned because she was disabled.
Correct.
And Moisha was somehow able to see that spark in her eyes and realize that she was going to be somebody very, very special.
Right.
So
And that was a
despite
love of
all
her.
the stuff that was happening, to
Right.
me, the relationship between Moisha and Hannah and Dodo was just so touching.
Yes.
So very, very touching.
Right.
And
And
you
she
know,
speaks about, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
we always worry about water. And I found it interesting that this all was about water. This was
Mhm.
all about who was going to own the resources of water and how much that was going to cost.
And right.
And
And isn't
to
water,
me,
is it, yeah,
go ahead.
isn't water life?
Yes, yes.
And that's, you touch on it, and I want to, on 26 and 27, pages 26 and 27, this is where Hannah and Moshe says, he's making money now, right? And he says, everybody's, all the Jews have left. They've left Chicken Hill. They're going into the town proper. We ought to leave. And she says, no. And he says, it's on page 27, he says, but the Jews are leaving Chicken Hill. She says, 10 blocks from here is leaving. I mean, you can hear the intonation, right?
Right.
10 blocks from here is leaving. You know what I mean? Let's go where they are. There are people, right? There are landsmen. There are people. Moshe, I like it here. I grew up in this house. The postman knows where I live. Exasperated, Moshe pointed out the kitchen window towards Pottstown below. Down the hill is America. But, right, that's where the dream is. The dream is down the hill. But Hannah was adamant. America is here. This area is poor, which we are not. It is Negro, which we are not. We're doing well. And she said, because we serve, you see? That is what we do. The Talmud says it. We must serve. But the Negro is our only customer here. Hasn't their money always spent? That's not the issue. Okay? His hands were on the table cradling a cup of tea. She gently placed one of her hands over his. Don't you see what they have, Moshe? Don't you see the well they draw from? To your point, right? That's it. That's the well. Now, later on, I want to point this out too, and this is right. When Malachi or Malachi and Moshe have a conversation, and they're talking about when Moshe came to the States, he says, I never tasted a tomato. I never tasted a banana. I didn't know what they were, right? And Malachi seemed distracted. He stared at the boy, Dodo, watching him toss papers into a small can as he moved toward the back of the hall. He's cleaning up. That's, Malachi says, that's what's wrong with this country. He said, the Negroes. And Moshe shrugged. They've done nothing wrong. They're good friends. My Nate, his wife, Addie, the helpers they bring, they help me a great deal. Did you know that all the historical sources of Hanukkah are in Greek? What's that got to do with my Negro workers? Light is only possible through dialogue between cultures, not through rejection of one or the other. Right? This is Malachi, the prophet, saying this. Moshe chuckled, nodded at Nate. My Nate doesn't speak Greek. Your Nate, does he belong to you? You know what I mean. Malachi frowned. The American ways you've learned, he shook his head. This country is too dirty for me. What's wrong with you? Nate is my friend. Is he now? Of course. Because you pay him? Of course. Is he supposed to work for free? But Malachi wasn't listening. He stared at Nate and at the boy working behind him and at the other Negroes. He watched them for several long moments, then murmured, I think the Negroes have the advantage in this country. How's that? At least they know who they are. And he goes on, Malachi, he steps down from the stage. He gets together his tools. And when he next spoke, he spoke in Yiddish. We are integrating into a burning house.
All the Negroes.
We're integrating into a burning house.
Not now.
And that's it. Isn't that now? Isn't that now? We're not speaking as cultures to one another. I mean, in fact, we're not speaking to one another in general as a society. We're speaking at one another. We're good at that. Republicans speak at Democrats, and Democrats speak at Republicans, and everybody's speaking at each other, and this progressive wing and that far right wing, and everybody's speaking at each other. And I think this is one of the many things that McBride really brings out. And the way that Midgie speaks about, and I had that in an opening slide that you didn't have because I didn't have the share screen on, is that we know how people are. We, the low gods and the loves, We know we're from Africa land, and we know we're true to ourselves, and we know what's important is what she was saying, and we're supposed to care for each other. She said, Logod, the meaning of Logod is parent. People are supposed to take care of each other. And I believe that is a huge part of this book, of what McBride is telling us. And one of the big criticisms that McBride poses is later on in the book. I want to make sure I get to this, and then we'll get into more questions and answers and so on discussion. If you remember on the hot dog, the chapter about the hot dog, okay? When Hannah is passing, she recalls a smell that she had only once, that she had this smell. She recognizes it from a smell she had only once. She said there was a hot dog in there somewhere in her dream. With that knowledge came the smell of something strange, something treifa, forbidden, unmistakable in its odor, and delicious. A hot dog. There was a hot dog in there somewhere in her dream, in the room, somewhere close. The aroma was unmistakable. It was so strong and present. She felt embarrassed and unclean. For the two things did not belong together. The precocious call of the universe and the sloppy, happy piece of treifa that her friend Bernice considered life's greatest treat when they were in school. She had tasted it once. It was delicious. And it goes on. She says, when she starts to get her wits about her, when she's coming to, she waves a hand in the air and says, throw that thing out. And Moshe sees her gazing at him, and his face brightened. Throw out what? And she says, the hot dog. And they can't find the hot dog that she's talking about. Okay. But later at the end of that chapter, chapter 18, it's on page 225. This is the odd group of well-wishers moving down the hallway after she's passed, and Moshe is sobbing. A ragtag assortment of travelers moving 15 feet as if it were 15,000 miles. Slow travelers all, arrivals from different lands, making a low trek through a country that claimed to be so high, a country that gave them so much yet demanded so much more. They move slowly like fussgazers, travelers, right? Wanderers seeking a home in Europe, or across Western African tribesmen herded off a ship on a Virginia shore to peer back across the Atlantic in the direction of their homeland. One last time, moving toward a common destiny, all of them, Isaac, Nate, and the rest, into a future of American nothing. It was a future they couldn't quite see, where the richness of all they had brought to the great land of promise would one day be zapped into nothing. The glorious tapestry of their history boiled down to a series of 10-second TV commercials, empty holidays, and sports games filled with the patriotic fluff of red, white, and blue, the celebrants cheering the accompanying dazzle without any idea of the horrible struggles and proud pasts of their forebears who had made their lives so easy. The collective history of the sad troop moving down the hospital corridor would become tiny blots in an American future that would one day scramble their proud histories like eggs, scattering them among the population while feeding mental junk to the populace on devices that would become as common and small as the hot dog that the dying woman thought she smelled. For in death, Hannah had smelled not a hot dog, but the future, a future in which devices that fit in one's pocket and went zip, zap, and zilch delivered a danger far more seductive and powerful than any hot dog, a device that children of the future would clamor for and become addicted to, a device that fed them their oppression disguised as free thought. Had the group of stragglers moping down the hallway seen that future, they would have all turned en masse and rushed from the hospital out into the open air and collapsed onto the lawn and sobbed like children. As it was, they moved like turtles toward Hannah's room as Moshe's howl rang out. They were in no hurry. The journey ahead was long. There was no promise ahead. There was no need to rush now. That's what McBride is talking about. That when we don't know who we are, and one of the things on page 220, when Hannah in her reverie before passing describes Moshe as a true Jew, someone who knew how how to love life. He was a true Jew, a man of ideas and wit, who understood the meaning of celebration and music and that blend of those things that meant life itself. When Hannah knows that what it is to serve life, when Midgie says it's our purpose to take care of others, when Moshe embodies a true Jew, knowing what celebration, what life is, and when we all understand, when we come to love a hot dog as representative of the United States of America, what are we missing? And I think that's what McBride, I think that's the book in one page. We identify with the wrong things. We identify with the new Google Titanium or Apple Titanium, whatever the new Apple phone is, the iPhone. That's what we want. That's America. But it's not America. So I think all of these things, all these questions, you're bringing that out. What's next? And thank you for.
Marcy has her hand raised. Let's go to that before there's another question in the chat too. Marcy, you want to unmute yourself?
It's sort of anticlimactic at this point, but when you were talking about how Hannah doesn't want to move from the town and her husband wants to go into the the main part of the city, it reminds me of that. It's typical, I think, in some ways, because he's the immigrant. He wants that American dream, but she was born here, so she's not quite the same. She doesn't see that aspiration. She doesn't see the necessity for that aspiration, while an immigrant would. That's all.
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? She says we're serving. His way of serving was providing entertainment and enjoying that. He can do that anywhere. Her way of serving was serving the people there.
Right.
Being there, being present where she was. Yeah.
Okay, it's let's see, Marcia wants to know, what about the idea that the higher you rise, the more shallow and greedy you become?
Yeah.
And the more you lose true values.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, you saved my reading of that page. And that's why I read it. I think that's it. And it's right there. I mean, how many of us, I forgot where I read it. I read it a decade or so ago, where someone wrote that the difference in community, how we looked at community. Before, we looked at community as what we could do for our neighbor. And now, in the United States, right, in our own communities, in our own neighborhoods, in our own blocks, what can I get for me? Right? How many people use turn signals that we've identified? People don't use turn signals anymore. Just let me know where you're going. You're driving, 2 tons of metal. Let me know where you're going. Yeah.
Go ahead, Joan.
Okay, so thanks, Bob, for bringing out all those themes, which was really terrific. I just have a few comments. One is, I think it was today's paper, I'm not sure. They were talking about the incredible rise of depression and suicide among young people whose parents devote themselves to making the kids' lives perfect and easy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not really the answer, because these people try to help other people. But just a couple things. I mean, he's opposed to, the writer, identity politics. It's not the idea of who's this and who's that, but that we're a community, as you said.
Yeah.
And I think he's very opposed to social media also. He mentions that a few times.
He doesn't have a TV.
Yeah. And
I read, he doesn't have a TV.
the name you were talking about, the name of this place in the book, growing up in Brooklyn, there was a hospital. It was called the Home for the Incurables.
Yeah.
Can you imagine going there?
Yeah.
Also, the boy in the next bed, he had cerebral palsy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it seemed like more than cerebral palsy. It was so overwhelming.
I know, it was so contorted. I know.
Horrible.
Very
Crazy.
extreme.
Yeah.
And the
Right.
other thing was that McBride's mother was, I read a few times, was molested by her rabbi father.
Oh, really?
That's what I read. You can check on it. That's
Well, I
what
would,
read.
yeah, I would leave religion too. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I saw a very good interview by a young Black woman. I don't know what her authority was, if she was a teacher or what. She was pretty young, but it was very good because it was very positive. She, you know, with all the conflicts in the Black community and the Jewish community, and
Mhm.
people saying that the Jews are rich and they take advantage of other people, she was bringing out all the positives that were shown in the book,
Right.
which I
And
thought
that's
was a
what he,
very good thing.
yeah, and that's what he saw. I mean,
Yeah.
he saw that, and he didn't see it as, let me phrase it differently. He saw it as at the age of going to college. In other words, you know, so many things that we see or remember from childhood, we're through a child's eyes. If you don't re-examine it as an adult, you're not seeing the truth. You're seeing it with a child's memory.
Mm.
And he was able to see this when he was a dishwasher who became a counselor. Really, he wasn't a
Right.
dishwasher. He becomes a counselor, and he sees this man's side friend who now lives in Florida with his husband, side friend, and Bob Hatchins, something like that. And they live in Florida. He's obviously in contact with them. And
You said McBride is in Florida with his
no,
husband?
they said the owner of the camp, the guy who ran the camp.
Oh.
Yeah.
I also think that his mother was a very positive role model. She didn't talk about who was better, Blacks or Jews.
Good for her.
And
Good
you
for
know,
her.
in that book, she said, "What's God? What color is God? God's the color of water," she said.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. Now I have to read that book. I mean, I had
Oh,
to,
you
I
never
decided
read
to-
it? It's wonderful.
Yeah, I decided to read it after I read this anyway.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
Well, Marcia I don't know if you covered this already. Marcia wanted to know the purpose of Malachi.
Yeah, that's why. Okay, so the purpose of Malachi, if I read it correctly, and I don't know, and this is why I went to read the prophet today, the 3 chapters, and as many of the prophets do in our Bible, in the Jewish Bible, they, you know, they're it's all about ethics, right? It's
Mhm.
you know, yeah, bring your sacrifices and stuff. That's great. But if you're bringing the sacrifices and you're complaining about bringing them, and remember, most of the sacrifices, not all, most of the sacrifices went to people who didn't have, most of them were eaten. Okay, a few of them were burnt completely, but most of them were eaten by the Kohanes and by the Levites, but also by the poor. So, and in Malachi, in the book of Malachi, the last words really of the books of the prophets, and this was this book, and it's saying, "Come to me." God says, "Come to me, and I will come back to you." But don't, in essence, don't bring a sacrifice that you don't mean. And don't bring a sacrifice and complain that, well, God's not giving me this, so I'm not going to behave properly, right? It's not a transaction. It's how you live your life that counts. It's not a transaction between you and God. That's one of the themes of that prophet. But it's also the other prophets. Behave nicely and things will come out nice. Go back to the way things were, right? To the way things that God, set up. That's the way it should be. Take care of each other. And that, I think that's why Malachi, or Malachi, the character of Malachi in the book, is mentioned. I think, without speaking to McBride or reading it, I don't know, but that's certainly the message of Malachi in the prophet. And I think he foretold the future at the beginning and in the middle of the book, with that the Negroes have the advantage because they know who they are. They know what's supposed to be. They know how to act. They're helping each other. They're helping you. Nate isn't doing it for the money. Your friend Nate, he says to Moshe, this is what your friend, because you pay him? No, Nate's not doing it for the money. I mean, he's doing it for the money, but because they have a friendship. So yeah.
You want to stop sharing your screen? I can't
Okay.
I can't see everybody and who
Oh,
has
I'm
their
sorry.
hand
I'm
raised
sorry.
because the screen
I'd like
was
to just
bigger.
make a quick comment, if I might. There are many people still very engaged.
Oh,
And having already read the book, I think I have to go back and do it again.
okay.
And Bob, I thank you very much.
Pleasure. I'm here. My family's out, so I'm here as long as you want.
A spirited discussion. And I want to thank you and all those who have joined us. And we have other book talks coming up. But to have the gift of Bob Abrams to be here today, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
And Nancy, thank you for watching out for all of us. And to be continued. And thank you all very much. And we'll keep you all posted. Watch us on Constant Contact. There's a lot of stuff coming up. Next week on March the 6th, there's a special presentation at the Bennett with the Bennett Center. The fact is that it's dedicated to the Romanowitz family and to our dear doctor. And join us March the 6th. You'll be getting an announcement to see that. And thank you all for coming. And to see you next time, everybody. Thank you very much.
Sorry to have given spoilers. Sorry about that.
But
Some people said, some people haven't read the book.
Yeah, well, but it is it's a book talk. It's not a book
Right.
suspense. It's a book.
the one aspect of it, Bob, which struck me, which we didn't cover tonight, what's with the skeleton?
So the skeleton, right? The skeleton is Doc.
Right, and the fact is that his character,
Has no.
did
Yeah.
not clearly fit in with the mode of the community.
Right, correct. And his death, right? It says in the book, his wife didn't love him. His children didn't miss him. He had no connections.
And the other thing is, think about what he did. He raped John.
Yeah, he raped Hannah and others.
Yeah.
And others.
The fact is that there was a character that didn't fit in at all.
Right. And who he was a representative of the white Christian community in the book.
I mean, the fact is there are so many messages in this book.
Whew.
And I think that you brought most of them out very well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm not used to presenting a book, so I didn't know, a novel.
Yeah, but the point is you bring sechel.
Oh,
So-
thank you. Yeah.
So the point is that I thought your presentation was excellent. And
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
I agree. I mean, and the way you present, I mean, I've heard so many times before, but you put humor into it and you put your own, I don't know.
Thank you.
The fact is the book brought out so many relevant personalities of what we really are today.
Yeah.
And
he started researching and doing the book a decade or so ago. Maybe he started writing this book long ago, right?
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for moderating.
Oh, it was great. It was fun to
And
see what
Thank you
people
to you.
said.
Kudos
but,
to you.
So now I'm going to go back and read part of that book again. I read it a while ago. I'm going to have to go back and read it again. But there's so many themes that go through. And actually, there was part of the book was when Dodo
Mhm.
said goodbye to. I mean,
Thank you, Monkey Pants. Yeah.
Those names got me crazy.
Thank you. Here they are. They learn to communicate with each other
Yes.
in a very intimate way. And what more intimate could it be but by touching?
Touching. And if they figured out how to communicate, why can't we?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what came up. And when Dodo says goodbye, monkey pants, I thought I had to read it back to Carol. I said, you won't believe it. Really
Oh.
took me up on this book.
Oh, it was when I now Margie had listened. She does a lot of audiobooks, and the audiobook does not have the stuff at the end where the acknowledgments where McBride says this book began as an ode to Cy Friend and blah blah blah, the Variety Club camp for handicapped children in Worcester, Passage, Pennsylvania. You know, just wow, wow. And when I read that, and you know, it's so much.
There were so many profound parts of the book that caused more than a double take.
Oh yeah.
And I have to say, this was a very enlightening discussion for me, because there were parts of it that I probably wanted to go back and reread.
Yeah.
Do a job in taking care of that. So, but the point is that when you think of people, you know, the symbolism of people who we consider to be disabled,
Yeah.
who had, you would think in a normal sense of the term, would have a huge problem in not only do they would have a problem in communicating, but in our real world, they communicated very well. I mean, the touching part, the very fact that, I mean, if by, you know, when you think about friendships and what is it that we do when we literally embrace each other? Is that a communication or what?
Of course.
And here, the only communication that Dodo and Monkey Pants could do
Was
was
touching.
to touch each other,
Oh.
and that Monkey Pants could not communicate with anybody, but he could with Dodo.
Right. He figured out you know, by raising an eyebrow them, and he agreed, and oh my gosh.
I mean, that part of the book really struck me, I have to say.
Oh, it was so hard to read because you knew what was happening. And that ability and that we're so people who are handicapped, right? That's a whole different discussion, right? That's a 20-minute discussion about how people who are handicapped are subject to the whims of everybody else. And I'm not talking about, I'm talking about what you and I consider, you know, I mean, Dodo was handicapped, especially after he falls from the roof, right? He can't move. He can read lips, but who's talking to him that he can't even turn his head at that point, right? A Monkey Pants is horribly disfigured.
Disfigured, and he suffered from multiple sclerosis. I think that's what he.
Yeah, it was a cerebral palsy and had to be some, yeah, MS and who knows what else, right? That is, look, whatever we suffer from, there are handicaps and so on. And what he brings out is the extreme of handicap living, right? Where people can't communicate.
Yep. But they figured out how.
But
that it just shows you how society condemns the other. The very
that's what I didn't bring out. I wanted to say that it's who was it who wrote it? It was Primo Levi. And in one of his books, he writes at the very beginning that I'm paraphrasing completely, but when we look at our neighbor as the other, when we begin with the other, we wind up in the lager, in the concentration camp.
Yeah, and that's what ran through my mind.
Yeah.
Here we have two individuals society has rejected.
Yes. Yeah.
And they find each other.
Yeah.
A meaningful relationship.
Yeah.
Nowhere else in the book.
No.
And I will tell you, you know, just talking now, I'm getting emotional about monkey pets. And
Yeah, right.
that one statement, goodbye, monkey. Are you
Oh
kidding?
my God. Right? Yeah. Because he freed him.
Yeah, that's right. And the fact is that when you want to talk about a meaningful relationship and a
Mhm.
level that people understand each other, and not only understand each other, but commiserate and get it,
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
two guys got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And what does it
throughout
hurt? Yeah.
and throughout the book, uh, there was so much tension amongst people
Oh,
where there's no way that they could get each other. And here
right.
we have two. By the way, that Penhurst area was where they
Mm.
put all of the throwaways.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't go through the whole thing.
I
What
mean, the
they
fact is,
did. Oh my God.
Penhurst represented a place where you put a throwaway,
Yeah.
and it turns out neither one of them were throwaways.
No, 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 of course not.
Bob, as we're talking now, even more is coming out to me as to why I love the book.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just take an aspect of it,
Yeah.
and the very fact that Doc raped Trana.
Yeah. A doctor? I mean, think of all right? We know when someone is accused of that, but then in the 20s, 30s, the 40s, the 50s, a doctor was, that's like God, right?
So there was so much humanity in this book
Oh,
at
wow.
every level. It almost causes me, if I didn't have other books that I had to read, because I got other book I got another book club I got to read it, and all these books are 400 pages. I can't get
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what I loved about this book. I'm used to reading, nonfiction, and I plod along through it. His prose are great. The symbolism is great. The characters are great. The dialogue is wonderful.
It's such
And he writes you know what else? I just started The Passenger by Cormac McCarthy.
uh-huh.
And The Passenger, and then Stella Maris is the add-on to the coda to it. And what different writers how they use different devices. And you pick up on it's in novels, you get it. You don't get it in nonfiction. In fiction, you get it. Cormac McCarthy doesn't have a lot of apostrophes. Wouldn't, couldn't, can't. There are no apostrophes in that. Yeah, and it's just you can tell he's bringing the voice of the person's thought, of the character's thought, or the person's speech out through that.
Well, I got to tell you that the conversation we're having now,
Mhm.
we had a great discussion in our book group. We got a great bunch of guys.
Yeah, sure.
It started, you might know the guy who started it. Did you know Ernie Fleischman?
The name is familiar. Yeah.
He was the superintendent of schools in Greenwich.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, a lot of these guys are just very bright and very thoughtful, and it is really good. Well, Bob, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
And
Thank
Nancy,
you.
thank you for
Bye.
Nancy, it's so nice.
It was great to see you.
Oh, and please give my love to everybody.
I will. We're
So now
all
you can
here.
have dinner,
We're all
right?
here.
Yeah.
So now you can have dinner, right, Nancy?
Oh,
It's,
yeah.
6:30 here. It's still light.
Yeah, it's time for dinner.
You can
Yeah.
see behind me, it's still
Yeah.
light.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
Bob-
stop bragging.
Bob, I must tell you that thank you so much. And by the way, our
Thank you.
question we just
Thank
had,
you.
Yeah.
great.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really
Be
appreciate it.
continued.
Okay. Okay.
Take care, everybody.
Okay, bye. Thank you again. Bye.